So welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we will be deep diving into Neuren Pharmaceuticals phase 2 study of NNZ-2591. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Susan Hedstrom, the Executive Director for the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, and I will be your moderator today. Joining me is Jordan Press and Nancy Jones from Neuren Pharmaceuticals, who will be giving a short presentation to help us learn more about their study. After the presentation, we'll have time for Q&A, and we will answer as many of your questions as possible. If you do have questions at any time during today's webinar, please send us your question through the question function of your Zoom portal. And with that, I would like to give you over to Jordan and Nancy from Neuren.
Thank you very much, Susan. And hello, everybody. It's a really great pleasure to be with you today and to give you this update about our phase 2 study. I'm going to be starting us off. I'm sort of giving you the why behind the study, and then Jordan is going to give you a lot more information about the study itself. So just briefly, a little bit about us. Neuren is a biopharmaceutical company, and we are specifically focused on rare neurodevelopmental disorders. So we are a relatively small company, and our whole team is very passionate about developing treatments for individuals that actually have a big unmet medical need. And we have 2 compounds in development. We have trofinetide, which, as you can see here, is actually now approved in the United States for the treatment of Rett syndrome. And NNZ-2591, which we're going to talk about today, is in development for 4 rare NDDs. Our Phelan-McDermott phase 2 just finished at the end of last year, and we read out positive results for that. And this is the compound that we are developing for PWS. So what is it and how does it work? So to answer that question, we take a little step back and talk a little bit about IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1. IGF-1 is a growth hormone in the body, that's everywhere in the body, including the brain. And in the brain, it is responsible for the development of the neurons and for maintaining the function of the neurons in the brain. And when it acts naturally in your brain, it breaks up into smaller pieces. And these are what we call metabolites. One of those is called cyclic glycine proline, or cyclic GP. And what NNZ-2591 is a synthetic analog of cyclic GP. And what that means is that it has the exact same molecular structure as a naturally occurring molecule, but with one small change. And that small change makes it have better properties to use as a medication. And those are the properties that you see in that column on the right. So what it means is that then it basically can have the same actions as the naturally occurring molecule. And what it does is that it helps regulate the amount of IGF-1 that's available. And that IGF-1 is actually what is used to help with the growth of the neurons. And so that tail out of the sort of branch that comes out of the neurons called the dendrite that sends messages to other neurons, and those are making the synapses or the connections. So it regulates, IGF-1 regulates that. It reduces neuroinflammation. It helps normalize the function of support cells. In this case, a microglia cell is a supporting cell to the neurons, and that also helps maintain that synaptic connectivity. And all of this is state dependent, meaning that it improves cells that are abnormal, but it doesn't have any negative impact on normal cells, which is important for safety. So just kind of going briefly, though, of the properties of NNZ-2591, it is something that is orally bioavailable, which means it's taken orally, and all the drugs able to be used and absorbed, has good pharmacokinetic properties, and that means how the drug is absorbed and distributed in the body, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it's an oral, liquid, flavored formulation, and it's dosed in relatively small doses. And it's well tolerated and has good safety profile in tox studies and clinical studies to date. So specifically the relevance for PWS, as you can see, the types of things that the IGF-1, NNZ-2591 can do, like the naturally occurring molecule, addresses things that we have observed or have deficits in PWS. So that dysregulation of the growth hormone and IGF-1 axis, the lower levels of IGF-1, chronic neuroinflammation. And then also IGF-1 influences a pathway, which is something that helps the synapses sort of connect together. And so that's also having a direct effect on that, which is relevant for PWS. So how are we at so far? So we've completed all our preclinical studies, the animal model studies, and we've completed a phase 1 study for looking at safety. And we have just started the phase 2 study, which we're going to talk about today. So just a brief overview of the phase 1 study. It was a study in healthy adults. There was 2 cohorts looking at a higher and a lower dose with 7 days of dosing with the NNZ-2591 and also a placebo comparison. And the safety results in some were good. It was well tolerated. Adverse events were all mild or moderate resolved during the trial. There were no serious adverse events or severe adverse events, and then no clinically significant findings on lab tests, vital signs, or cardiac tests. The most common adverse event was drowsiness and just 1 continuation after the first dose due to AEs, which resolved when they stopped dosing. And for PK, basically what we saw is what we would want to see is like a predictable PK profile. So collectively, what did the preclinical and phase 1 studies tell us, which is important for how we developed and moved forward into the phase 2? Well, 1, it shows that NNZ-2591 can have an actual effect on the brain cells. So we saw improved structure and function of neurons and levels of IGF-1. It shows from the mouse model that it can improve analogous impairments. And then also that these impairments are sort of, the improvements are actually seen across a range of symptoms. And then there was a good safety profile, and it was well tolerated in the phase 1 study. So how did we know what to look at when moving into phase 2? So there's 3 things you can see here that we considered: what the drug does, what's seen in the animal models, and then also what's meaningful for individuals and people with PWS, which is the most important thing. So as I've highlighted, the drug helps with improving synaptic connectivity. So it can help impact symptoms that are related to neurological function. And in the animal models, again, we're improving impairments across a range of symptoms, but also we saw in those animal models improvement in biomarkers, including fat mass, insulin, and IGF-1 levels. And then taking into that consideration, obviously, then we really want to then prioritize what is functionally important for individuals with PWS. And for this, we actually got input from both of the advocacy groups, experts in PWS, and then from you yourselves and individuals with PWS through the questionnaires and the published research that's out there. So taking all of that into consideration in terms of what we decided to focus on in the phase 2 study. So at this point, I will pass it over to Jordan to tell you more about the study itself.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Hey, everyone. My name is Jordan Press. I'm the Associate Director of Clinical Development and Operations here at Neuren, and I serve as the PWS Program Lead. And yeah, before I start, I just want to echo Nancy and give a big thanks to Susan and the Foundation for giving us this opportunity to review our protocol with you today. So I'll start by spending some time just getting into the study overview of our PWS trial. The study itself is a phase 2 study with a target enrollment of 20 participants. We are enrolling participants, both male and female, ages 4 through 12 years old. Enrollment split into 2 cohorts. There's group 1, which consists of the older age group, 8 to 12-year-olds, and then group 2, which is the younger group, consisting of the 4 to 7-year-olds. After at least 3 participants in the older group have received 2 weeks of treatment at the starting dose, at that point, our safety committee will review those participants' safety and tolerability data, and if that data is acceptable, then enrollment for the younger age group will be able to proceed. The study itself is open label, so no patients will be receiving any placebo on the study. All participants will receive active drug for 13 weeks. And then I'll speak in a few slides about potential treatment beyond that 13 weeks for participants on the study. The drug is taken orally in liquid form. It's taken every day, 2 times per day, in the morning and the evening. And the study itself will have a combination of in-clinic visits and in-home nursing visits. There's a total of 5 in-clinic visits and 12 at-home visits for the study. Next slide, please. So continuing on, this is a summary of our primary and secondary objectives. Our first primary goal is to evaluate safety. We'll be looking at adverse events from the start of drug administration through the time of the last clinic visit, as well as monitoring patients by a comparative review of various safety assessments, such as lab tests and physical and neuro exams, along with several others. Our second primary goal is to measure pharmacokinetics, which you might know is essentially just measuring how the drug's absorbed by one's body and how it moves around the body. So for this, there will be blood taken before and after drug administration at week 2, week 6, and then the last end of treatment visit to take those measurements. And then secondarily to all of that, the study will also evaluate one's clinical response to the drug, as well as evaluate a range of outcomes listed here, such as behavioral issues, anxiousness, language, social interaction, learning and cognition, hyperphagia, sleep and daily function. And we'll also have several biomarkers that we're looking at, all of which we hope might aid in informing us of the design of a future pivotal trial. Next slide. This slide goes through some of the key eligibility criteria. As mentioned before, we're enrolling patients with a confirmed diagnosis of PWS, ages 4 through 12. Patients at screening must weigh between 12 to 100 kilograms or 26 to 220 pounds. Participants must be able to swallow the liquid study medication. And I'll take a minute just to note here, for everyone's information, the study medication itself has a strawberry flavoring. We've gotten some feedback and know that this might not be optimal for patients with PWS, and we've heard those concerns, and we took time to look into why this decision was made on our end with our clinical manufacturing group. And essentially, we were told that the flavoring of the drug is just entirely unpalatable without any type of flavoring. So that's really the primary decision behind that, just as a for your information. But it also means we have to ensure patients don't have a strawberry allergy as well. So that's another protocol requirement. We're also looking for patients with a stable seizure profile and subsequent stable seizure treatment regimen. There's several questionnaires that the patients and the families will need to fill out to confirm that they're a good fit for the study. We'll do a review of the patient's medications that they're currently taking. In total, we require that patients enrolled in the study don't exceed taking 12 concomitant medications during the course of the study. And we also require that the study site examines a patient's full medical history to also aid in determining eligibility. And then if you want to see just a full and detailed listing of our inclusion-exclusion criteria, you can just go onto clinicaltrials.gov. Our study information is posted there. That's our NCT number listed on the slide. You can enter that, or you can just search for PWS-001. That should bring up the study also. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're currently planning up to 9 study sites located across the major regions of the US. We're posting new sites open to enrollment in real time on clinicaltrials.gov. We're also informing FPWR of when new sites are open to enrollment so that they may inform you and the PWS community when these new sites are opening up. And just a quick note on traveling to sites. If families need to travel long distances to participate, or really any distance at all, we're using a white glove concierge service, which will pay for all of your travel out of their own pockets. So like the costs of flights, ground transportation, lodging, that will never need to be paid out of your own pockets. The only out-of-pocket expenses that you'll face are things for like meals and parking. And we're very flexible with reimbursing for those types of expenses. We don't really even provide a limit. We basically just ask you to use your good judgment, avoid meals that are overly extravagant, that type of thing. Yeah, and regardless of all that, all the out-of-pocket expenses can be submitted to the concierge service, and they'll reimburse you pretty promptly. Next slide, please. So this is a listing of the sites that are currently open. As I noted before, we plan to have additional sites open across the country, such as the West Coast, in the coming weeks and months. I'll stop here just quickly and give a brief overview of the current recruitment activity at a high level, which is really to say that we've received a good amount of interest, and I'm happy to report that we have a number of screenings scheduled through mid-April. But I do want to note that we've already screened several candidates, all of which have unfortunately screen failed. And I wanted to bring up the screen failures today just to make an important distinction to everyone on the webinar, because I understand that, and we understand that the word can get around the community about these kinds of challenges. But I just did want to point out that each one of the screen failures we've seen have occurred for different reasons that are all really independent of one another. We've had a lot of internal discussions surrounding this. We really don't believe it's due to any protocol limitations. It's really just honestly come down to being unfortunate luck and unfortunate timing. So in saying that, our plan is to keep moving forward with the protocol as is, and continue to see these families at our clinical sites that are scheduled for screening, and really try to get the study off the ground in the coming weeks and months. And then, one last note on this slide, just I provided here at the bottom our central study referral email address, which is managed by our colleague, Henry Nixon. And for anyone who's interested in learning more about the study and the availability at our sites to potentially screen, I would highly recommend that you contact Henry at that email address. He'll be quick to get back to you with additional information. Next slide. Here's just some places you can find out some more information on the trial. Encourage you to take a look at our study website at pws-trial.com. As mentioned before, we're actively updating clinicaltrials.gov. And then finally, if you go to Neuren's website at neurenpharma.com, you can sign up for alerts by following these directions right here on those two sub-bullets. Next slide. Okay, and then last but not least, what might happen after this phase 2 trial? I alluded to this in the earlier slides. So if the study results from this trial are positive, we'll likely plan for a larger phase 3 trial. In all likelihood, it would be a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial that would include an open-label extension that would be opened in tandem to that. And so what our commitment would be to all patients and families that participate in this phase 2 trial is that if you complete this phase 2 trial, you can skip right ahead to the open label extension once it's open. There's nothing you'd have to do in regards to the phase 3, potentially double-blind study. In order to be eligible to screen, you'd automatically be eligible to screen for the open label extension study. Next slide. Yeah, and that's it. This is our forward-looking statement just for your reference, but that's all we have for our trial overview today, and we really appreciate everyone's time and consideration of our trial. And I'll hand it back over to Susan for any questions.
Thank you so much, Jordan and Nancy, for going through some of the details of this study. As promised, we're going to open up the lines for Q&A. So if anyone wants to submit questions, you can do so by typing it into the Q&A chat function of Zoom. We do have a couple of questions in here already that we can start getting through. Let's start with the oral formulation. So you mentioned it's strawberry flavored. Is it sweetened with a sweetener to make it more palatable?
That's a good question. I would have to. I can take that down and get back to you on that. Susan, I can get back to you to provide that answer. I'm not 100% sure, unless Nancy, you have more information on that.
Yeah, it does have a sweetener flavor. I don't know the exact. We can check with the exact type if people want to know. If we can share that. But yeah, it has a sweetness.
I think it would be helpful. I think while they didn't specifically ask what sweetener it would be, I know that some families are interested in knowing specifically the sweetener that's being used.
Yeah, we can check with our development team.
How about country of residence? If you live in Canada, can you come down to the US and participate in one of these trial sites?
Yeah, that should be acceptable. I mean, we're willing to take as long as patients can travel to the site and meet the eligibility criteria. Otherwise, we're open to patients traveling from other countries, and Canada's not terribly far, so that should work out.
Yeah, I think the only, sorry, just to jump in, the only consideration is for countries that are further away. We would really want you to be resident in the US at the time that you're doing the study, because the consideration for that is just that it can be a substantial change in just lifestyle if you're picking up and moving and coming out just for a study. And that could be something that's affecting your behavioral treatments and things like that. So we do have requirements for any kind of treatments you are on to be stable. So I think that those kind of things would be taken on a case-by-case basis, and that you would actually be able to be in the US for the duration of the study, because it's very difficult to be able to kind of travel back and forth, and the concern with the disruption for your regular treatments for that. So that's just one of the considerations if you're coming from a place that's a longer distance than, say, if you're just going over the border, crossing over from Canada to New York, for example.
Many of our children with Prader-Willi syndrome are on growth hormone. Is there any requirements regarding growth hormone? Do they need to stay on growth hormone? Do they need to come off growth hormone? How are you incorporating that into your study protocol?
They're required to be on a stable dose of growth hormone. So everyone needs to be on growth hormone.
Going back to locations and countries, is this trial being offered in Australia, or will it be offered in Australia?
Right now, here I can hop in. Right now, we're not looking at Australia as a current location. But again, we're in phase 2. You know, we never know what will happen in phase 3. I think that's, you know, a much broader Neuren discussion about globalization.
So you mentioned 9 sites currently in the US. We have Philly, Atlanta, and DC. Can you give generalized regions where there might be other sites for those of us who are perhaps on the West Coast and don't want to travel that far?
Yeah, on the West Coast, there will be sites in Southern California and Northern California. And then we will have sites also somewhat closer to the, I guess, the middle of the country, Alabama, Nashville. It's still a little bit towards the East Coast. But yeah.
Has there been any team conversations about how to accommodate parents who are working? You know, can visits be arranged on the weekends or on specific days of the week so that work schedules are not as impacted with the travel?
Do you want me to hop in here, Jordan? I think that's something we could definitely look into. I think it probably would be something that we could look to logisticate it at one of the independent sites if possible. I think at the academic centers, that's going to be more difficult just because they generally have a very rigorous schedule and everybody has a Monday through Friday type of regimen. But it's certainly something we can look into. No guarantees, but we can take that back and let you know.
There was a question about the single adverse event that led to a discontinuation in the phase 1 study. Is that available? Do we know what that one adverse event was?
They have in the phase 1 trial that she had some the subject had dizziness and some wobbliness in terms of walking and things like that, which resolved once they stopped the treatment.
Okay. And going back to screening failures, you mentioned that there's been a couple of screening failures. Is there any one thing that is causing those screening failures, or is it very independent and unique to the individuals?
It's been independent and unique to the individuals. I can't go terribly specific into it. But it's not any one thing that would point us in the direction of making a protocol change. It's all been very circumstantial to that particular individual.
Now, I looked at the pws-trial.com website, and I saw the list of eligibility. Does clinicaltrials.gov go a little bit into more detail so you can get a better feel if you're concerned about exclusion and inclusion criteria?
So clinicaltrials.gov will have verbatim what's in our protocol. I can't recall off the top of my head if our website goes verbatim into what that is. I think it's more of a summary on our website. If you go to clinicaltrials.gov, it is word for word what's in our protocol, and that should give a really good sense.
Okay.
And Susan, if anybody has any questions, even after reading the IE, the inclusion exclusion on the website, anyone can reach out to one of the sites. I mean, they've been really helpful. I know that folks are reaching out to the sites, or they can reach out to the CRO and reach out to our logistics coordinator. So there are some resources there where people can get questions answered and have an understanding of whether this is a good fit for them.
And I slipped Henry's email into the chat. So if anyone wants to ask specific questions about their own individual eligibility, Henry would be able to answer those questions. Is that correct? They can email him directly?
Yeah, they can email him directly. If he doesn't know the answer, he'll triage that to one of his colleagues on the clinical side. And then if again, if you want to get connected to a site, he can be the one to connect you to the most appropriate site based on their availability to take on additional screenings, and also your location and what makes the most sense for you.
Now, this trial is relatively exciting because it's one of the few clinical trials, especially right now, that is really accepting children as young as 4, the 4 to 12 age range. So many individuals have not been eligible to participate in a clinical trial, and now they are. I'm hearing a lot of really interested families. Their kids are in that 4 to 7 age range. So they're not enrolling yet. You mentioned that we need to have a few in that older group. The 8 to 12s need to complete part of this study first. What's the timeline? I mean, parents are really anxious. They really want to get started. Is this 3 months? Is this 6 months? What does your crystal ball say?
Yeah, we're really anxious too. I wish I had a crystal ball. It's unfortunate we saw all the screen fails kind of right in a row. But hopefully, the tides will turn with these additional screenings that are coming in. And I would say that if we have, what we typically expect to see, which is about a 75% around success rate once we get patients consented, then, we're looking at, considering the number of patients we have coming in through mid-April, we're looking at potentially 3 patients enrolled by the summertime.
So enroll. So by late summer, you'd be ready for the 4 to 7.
It would probably be, around early to midsummer if these 3. So say we have these 3 enrollments that I hope for, and that, based on just that statistic I threw out is more likely than not, then you're looking at for them to screen, enroll, say that last patient screens mid-April, that gets in, that brings us to their baseline in early June. And then 2 weeks later, after they've been on drug for 2 weeks, at that point, once it's safe for them to continue and deemed safe by our safety committee to open enrollment to the younger age group, that's when we'd be able to get those younger children in. So say mid-June, if everything goes perfect.
So what do you want this younger age group to do right now? I mean, they're ready to go. Can they pre-screen? Do you want them to wait and reach out in June? I mean, we FPWR will certainly make announcements when that younger age group becomes eligible, but what do you want our families to do right now?
I think the best thing for them to do right now is to reach out to Henry and just get their information to him. There's been a number of families that have in that age group that have reached out to him already. He's ready to triage them when the time comes. Right now, we're not having the sites do pre-screening activities for that age group yet, but that will start once we get that first patient in, and then the second patient in. That's going to really pick up speed. So as of right now, I think the best thing they could do is reach out to Henry, and have their information readily available to him.
Mhm. Perfect. We've got a lot of great questions. For families who their loved ones are in other clinical trials on open label, are they able to participate in this trial if they're in an open label study currently?
Oh, if they're receiving another study drug, Nancy, I don't.
No, if they're in an
Yeah.
interventional study, they're not able to be in this trial, if it's interventional. If it was something like an observational study, where there's no treatment, then that would be okay, like a natural history study. But if it's any kind of intervention, then they wouldn't be able to be in the trial.
Now, we're looking to fill this trial this year, so likely this study will be complete before DCCR potentially gets approved. However, theoretically, if DCCR was to get approved, would people on DCCR also be able to participate in this trial? So it becomes an approved drug. Can they then participate in this study?
If it's not an interventional trial, if it's a medication, and it would have to, as long as it would fit with the criteria we have for ConMed. So we do have specific criteria for ConMed. So anything that's a treatment that people use that's not experimental, as long as it doesn't meet one of the exclusion criteria for the which are listed, this is quite a more detail, then that would be something that would be okay. It's because it's considered a approved medication as opposed to an experimental medication.
We have a couple questions in here that are all around the general theme of what benefits are we hoping to receive from this drug? So I think we might start with one question which could help us understand is what were the outcomes that you saw in the other rare disease condition that has completed their phase 2? What positive aspects did you see?
Yeah, so they're asking about the Phelan-McDermott trial that just finished in phase 2. Yeah, no, thanks. So like this trial, it actually the primary outcome measure is safety and tolerability, and it was safe and well tolerated, and there weren't any clinically significant values on the safety parameters during treatment. And in terms of efficacy, what we saw was a pattern of significant improvement across a number of efficacy measures, both assessed by the clinicians and the caregivers. And these were seen on 10 of the 14 efficacy measures, because then this was a secondary endpoint for this study, where they had statistically significant improvement on 10 of the 14 efficacy endpoints. And for PMS, these were in areas that were clinically important. So communication, behavior, cognition and learning, and socialization.
And what do you hypothesize we're going to see in Prader-Willi syndrome? What benefits are you hoping we'll receive?
Well, this is why we're actually doing the trial, to be able to determine what types of things improve. So one of the things which I talked about in the presentation that you do prior to having your studies where you look at efficacy is the animal models, and they give you an idea of what types of things can improve. And in that animal model, it was across a range of different types of symptoms. So that is why we've included a range of efficacy measures. When Jordan was presenting, there was quite a range of different things, from PWS symptomatology, anxiousness, behaviors, those types of things. So we're looking across a range of those things to see if likewise in the actual population and in individuals with PWS, some of these things will improve. And it could be, this is what we hope to test, like maybe potentially, theoretically, any one of those types of things.
So families always ask me about timelines. So you're currently doing a phase 2 trial, which how long would you let's walk them through the timeline. Phase 2 is going to take how much time? Then you need to plan for a phase 3, which would take additional time. What does this timeline potentially look like?
Do you want me to take that, Jordan? Or do you
Oh,
want to
sure.
go
Yeah.
through it?
Sure.
Well, please understand, there's always there's a range, right? We always have parameters in clinical development. And as you are aware, there are so many steps that we need to go through once a trial ends enrollment, once we complete treatment phases, right? So we have regulatory engagement. So for the phase 2, let's say that we would potentially complete enrollment. We are hoping through the end of the year, Q1-ish, right? So then we're looking at probably another year until we were able to get in front of the FDA with our proposed phase 3. We always try to, and I'm kind of giving the longer end of that parameter. We always try, just so everybody's aware, because that we're here because this is our passion as well. I mean, this is what we live for, is to work with groups like yours and families like yours. And so we are always trying to accelerate. We would suspect probably it could be a range of 4 to 6-ish years before we could get something. The FDA is out there letting us know that they are wanting to have more frequent engagement. They do look at the rare disease in a different light, and we are trying to really push and capitalize on the fact that the FDA is allowing those types of opportunities for collaboration. So I would say probably within the 4 to 6 year range is what we could at least guesstimate for now.
That's great. I really appreciate your team getting on the webinar with us today and sharing this information. And that timeline, Rebecca, it's really good for us to have an expectation of what the timelines realistically are. As a parent, I'm just, clinical trials take time, but finding treatments for PWS, this is where they begin. They begin in clinical trials, and it's going to require a movement from the entire Prader-Willi community to fill these studies so that we can get the answers that we're looking for and ultimately get treatments that help our children and adults with PWS live full and complete lives. So that said, I'd really like to thank everyone who joined us today, everyone who took the time to learn more about this particular clinical trial, NNZ-2591, and, for learning more about clinical trials in general and just considering participation. Thank you to you all. If you do have further questions, we did share a contact email for Henry. The email was pws-trialreferral@precisionformedicine.com. It is in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to him if you have further questions. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.